Back in 2011, when I was 18, my ex and I were living with my mom in this modest neighborhood. Money was tight, and we were trying to save up for our own place while working entry-level jobs. It wasn't ideal, but my mom was supportive, and we had a roof over our heads. Our next-door neighbor was this sweet elderly lady who lived with her great-grandson, who was around 15 at the time. From the day we moved in, everyone in the neighborhood warned us about this kid. The neighbors would tell us stories about stolen items, vandalism, and general troublemaking, but we tried to keep an open mind at first. That open-mindedness didn't last long. One morning, we walked out to our driveway to find a mess of cigarettes shot up with a BB gun scattered everywhere. After checking our car's security camera, we saw him breaking into our vehicle, which we always kept locked. He must have found a way around it, and stealing a pack of cigarettes only to destroy them and leave the mess for us to clean up. This kid had this bike that he was obsessed with. He'd ride it up and down the street all day with his friends, showing off and being generally obnoxious. The real issue was that he kept leaving it right behind our vehicles in the shared driveway. We'd repeatedly move it to his yard to prevent any accidents, but he'd just put it back in our way the next day. Then one day, his precious bike disappeared. We had nothing to do with it, but he apparently thought we did. That's when things got really ugly. My ex was taking our dog out one afternoon. She was this sweet, gentle thing who never caused any trouble. The dog ran into his side of the yard and into some bushes, which wasn't unusual, but before my ex could get there, our dog had vanished. We spent the entire day searching for her. While we were calling her name and checking every corner of the neighborhood, we noticed the kid and his friends standing around, watching us and laughing. We approached them and asked if they had seen our dog anywhere. The kid claimed they hadn't seen her but offered to help us look. Their help was obviously fake though. They would barely look around before moving on to the next spot, snickering the whole time. When they walked away, one of the kid's friends shouted back at us, mockingly wishing us good luck finding our dog. They all laughed as they left us there, worried sick about our pet. Days passed and we were devastated. We put up posters, contacted shelters, and did everything we could think of to find her. Then, mysteriously, one of the kid's friends brought our dog to the elderly great-grandmother's house. Our dog was different after that. Every time she saw the kid, she would start howling and run inside, terrified. This happy, friendly dog was now traumatized and stayed that way for months. Even if he hadn't taken her himself, he definitely knew what happened to her. During all this drama, guess what showed up in our driveway again? His bike parked right behind our car like nothing had happened. My ex and I had reached our breaking point. We knew confronting him directly wasn't smart. We were technically adults, and he was a minor. But we couldn't let him get away with hurting our dog. Late one night, we grabbed our biggest kitchen knives and some pink spray paint. We went to work on that bike like artists on a canvas. We slashed all the tires, covered every inch of it in bright pink paint, and carved dog napper deep into the metal frame. Then we dragged it far into the woods behind this abandoned house down the street and threw it into the biggest thorn bush we could find. The next morning we heard him screaming when he couldn't find his bike. He never proved it was us, and he never left anything in our driveway again. In fact, he pretty much avoided our whole side of the street after that. A few months later, his great-grandmother moved them both to a different neighborhood. I heard from other neighbors that he tried to tell the police we destroyed his bike, but without any evidence, and given his reputation in the neighborhood, nothing came of it. I know what we did wasn't exactly legal, but watching him lose the one thing he truly cared about after what he did to our dog felt like justice. I was a 19-year-old college student living with my dad when this whole mess started. Money was tight, so I couldn't afford my own place yet, but my dad was cool with me staying at home while I worked part-time and studied. I had just gotten out of a long relationship and decided to try online dating. That's where I met this guy through a dating app. Right from our first conversation, something felt off about him. His first message was typical creepy dating app stuff, calling me beautiful and suggesting I needed some excitement in my life. I replied politely, explaining that I was just looking to meet new people and see where things went. He immediately got pushy, trying to convince me to meet him that night at some spot he knew. When I told him I didn't meet people the same day I started talking to them and preferred to chat first, he got irritated. He demanded to know what the point of being on the app was if I was going to waste people's time. I should have blocked him right then, but I tried to be polite one last time. I simply told him I wasn't interested and wished him luck with his search. That's when things took a dark turn. He called me a stuck-up witch and then revealed he knew where I lived, mentioning Pine Street specifically. He bragged about having friends in my area and told me to watch my back. My blood ran cold. I had never mentioned where I lived, and Pine Street was 3 hours away from where he was supposedly located. I immediately took screenshots of everything and called the police. 2 officers came to take my statement. The officers explained that while his messages constituted a terrorist threat, there wasn't much they could do unless he actually showed up. When I asked if I just had to wait until he tried to hurt me, they said they would speak to him at his workplace, which he had listed in his profile, and advised me to keep documenting everything. The officers went to his workplace, but he refused to talk to them. That's when I decided to do some digging of my own. His profile was linked to his social media, where he proudly displayed where he worked, a multinational company. I found his family members and sent them all the screenshots. 3 days later, I received a message from his mother. She apologized profusely for her son's behavior, calling it absolutely unacceptable. She told me that she and her husband were driving from 3 states away to deal with this personally, and asked me not to tell him they were coming. I assured her I wouldn't say anything and thanked her for taking it seriously. A few years later, something reminded me of what he'd done. I decided it was time for real consequences. I made a public post with his picture, workplace information, and all the screenshots of his threats. I asked people to share it to warn other women. The post got taken down after 2 days, but by then it had over 3,000 shares. His company's social media was flooded with people sharing the screenshots and demanding action. The company responded with a generic message about taking the allegations seriously and handling it according to their internal policies. I figured they'd just sweep it under the rug, but I was wrong. A woman who worked at his company messaged me privately, thanking me for exposing him. She revealed that several women there had been uncomfortable around him but were afraid to speak up. She told me they had called him into a meeting with Human Resources, his boss, and their chief executive officer. 2 days later, she messaged me again with an update. He had been fired and escorted out by security. She explained that their CEO was furious when she saw the threatening messages, and he wouldn't even be able to use this job as a reference despite working there for 4 years. I thought that was satisfying enough, but then I got one final message that made me laugh. His grandmother reached out claiming what I was doing was illegal and that I couldn't ruin someone's life over a few messages. I responded by pointing out that I was perfectly within my rights to share proof of someone threatening to stalk and murder me, and suggested she teach her grandson not to threaten women. I never heard from him again, but I did hear through mutual connections that he had to move back to his hometown because he couldn't find another job in the city. Ever since I was young, I've always been a bookworm. My family knows this well. Whenever we go shopping, they leave me somewhere comfortable with my audiobooks while they browse the stores. It's our little arrangement, and it works perfectly for everyone. I get to enjoy my books in peace, and they get to shop without me complaining about being bored. This incident happened about a year ago. I was sitting outside a women's clothing store waiting for my mother and sister who were inside shopping. I had my favorite street food combo, French fries and sausages, and was perfectly content in my little spot in the shade. I put on my noise-canceling headphones and started listening to my audiobook about the adventures of Kavote. A woman with an adorable German Shepherd puppy approached me. She politely asked if I could watch her puppy while she picked up something from the pharmacy nearby. I agreed without hesitation. The puppy was well behaved, and the woman returned within a few minutes, thanked me, and left with her puppy. I went back to my audiobook and food, completely immersed in the story. I was so absorbed that I barely noticed when an elderly woman with a massive pit bull stood next to my seat. She was talking on her phone and her dog was eyeing my food with obvious interest. Being a dog lover myself, I couldn't resist sharing. I gave the friendly giant a few pieces of my sausages. The dog was incredibly gentle taking the food, and after a while, I realized the elderly woman was nowhere to be seen. Checking the dog's collar, I saw the name Choclilo, which I remembered means small corn in Spanish. The irony wasn't lost on me, considering this was one of the biggest pit bulls I'd ever seen. But despite the intimidating size, Choclio was just a big softy who wanted nothing but pets and attention. My mother came out of the store and I explained the situation to her. Choclio immediately gave her an enthusiastic headbutt, nearly knocking her over in his excitement to get more attention. A few minutes later, the elderly woman emerged from one of the stores. She immediately started thanking me profusely, expressing her gratitude for the store's dog-sitting services. She explained that she had been in a hurry and couldn't leave her baby alone. That's when it hit me. She thought I worked there as a dog sitter. When I explained that I didn't actually work there and was just waiting for my family, the elderly woman's face turned white as a sheet. She began apologizing frantically, horrified by her mistake. She expressed her fears about how her poor baby could have been kidnapped or taken for dog fights. My mother, seeing how distressed the woman was, quickly jumped in to reassure her. My mother calmed her down by explaining that I love animals and that Choclio had been absolutely wonderful. She described him as a gentle giant, which seemed to comfort the elderly woman. Soon they were deep in conversation about their pets. My mother shared stories about our own dogs at home, and the elderly woman told us about how she adopted Choclilo from a shelter 2 years ago. The elderly woman proudly told us how everyone had been afraid of him because he was a pit bull, but she knew he was just the sweetest baby. She shared that he even sleeps with his teddy bear every night. They continued chatting until my sister finally emerged from the store. We exchanged warm goodbyes, and Choclio gave us each one last affectionate headbutt before leaving with his owner. Even though this happened a year ago, I still smile when I think about that massive pit bull with the ironic name, and his owner who saw nothing but a precious baby in her giant furry companion. It's funny how a simple misunderstanding led to such a heartwarming encounter. This story happened when I was 8, and it still makes my blood boil thinking about how this woman tried to get away with it. My mom had to pick up me and my little brother from the bus stop every day since we were too young to walk home alone. We lived in this fancy gated community where people were always out exercising or walking their dogs. That day, while my mom was waiting for our bus, this woman was walking her 2 dogs across the street. The woman's dogs were doing their business near the forest edge, and when she bent down to clean up after them, she dropped both leashes. What happened next was terrifying. Both dogs immediately charged at my mom. She tried to fight them off, but they still managed to tear open her thigh. When the woman finally got control of her dogs, instead of helping, she just gave my mom what turned out to be fake information and left. Just walked away while my mom was bleeding heavily. Me and my brother arrived at the bus stop minutes later. I remember screaming when I saw all the blood. When I asked my mom what happened, she explained about the dog attack and told me she needed me to watch my brother while she called an ambulance. My little brother was confused and scared. He couldn't understand how dogs could hurt someone, saying our dog was nice. My mom had to explain to him that some dogs could be dangerous when they weren't trained properly and told him to stay with me. She had to leave us alone at home while she went to the hospital, something that had never happened before. My dad was working in another county, so we had no choice. A few days later, after my mom got surgery and rabies shots, we found out the woman had given a fake name and address. The police came to investigate, and that's when we learned there had been 2 other similar attacks in our neighborhood. My mom contacted one of the victims, who happened to be my classmate's mom. Their descriptions of the woman and her dogs matched perfectly, but my mom, being conflict-averse, decided to drop it. That's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. I put on my Girl Scout uniform and told my mom I was going to collect cookie money. Instead, I went to investigate the street where the other attacks happened. I went door to door, asking neighbors if they knew anyone with a pit bull and a brown Labrador. One neighbor confirmed that the house at the end of the court had those exact dogs. I double-checked with other neighbors to be sure, then took pictures of the house and the car's license plates with my iPod Touch. When I knocked on the door, a teenage girl answered, and behind her were the exact dogs my mom had described. I asked if she wanted to buy Girl Scout cookies, but she politely declined. It didn't matter though. I'd gotten what I needed. I ran home excited to show my mom the evidence. My mom completely exploded, screaming at me about how I could have been killed. When I tried to show her the pictures, she told me I couldn't just take photos of people's houses. She worried that the dogs might be innocent, and asked how I would feel if someone wrongly accused our dog and had him taken away. I admitted I would be upset, but told her I'd rather blame the wrong dogs than let the real ones hurt more people. This really set her off, but I wasn't backing down. I threatened to call the police myself if she wouldn't do anything with the evidence. My mom tried to tell me I couldn't just call the police like that, but I insisted I would, warning her that more people could get hurt if we did nothing. Finally, she gave in and reported it to the authorities. She never told me exactly what happened after that, but I know the dogs were taken by the county, and a year later, a new family moved into that house. Years later, my mom told me she was proud of my determination, even if she didn't approve of my methods. The woman turned out to be renting the house under a different name, which is why she wasn't in any of the community records. She had been moving from place to place whenever her dogs attacked someone, avoiding consequences by giving false information. Not only did she lose custody of the dogs, but she also faced charges for the attacks and for providing false information to authorities. The teenage girl I met was her daughter, who thankfully wasn't involved in any of the cover-ups. I might have been just a kid with an iPod Touch and a Girl Scout uniform, but I managed to stop this woman from hurting anyone else in our community.